Hey, good afternoon, guys. First of all, before I start this, I'd like to ask you to do me a small favor. That's like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. Also, guys, click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere. You can go to all your favorite audio podcast and video podcast affiliates from iTunes, iHeart, Audible, Amazon, Spotify, Radio Public, Pandora, and to an extent, SiriusXM. And, and Radio Public, I believe I said as well. You can also find me at other video outlets like Dailymotion, Rumble, VENMO, and Odyssey. I also have a Patreon. Please check that out. I have a Venmo and a Cash App. Check that out as well. Help me out. I also have a Fourth Wall store and a Teespring store. Links for those will be in the description. Fourth Wall link is at the top. Teespring is at the bottom. Also, guys, there will be affiliated stores listed, especially with the topic here. So if you want to check that out, it helps me out via commissions, and it helps you out, especially with the topic I'm going to talk about and get you ready for that very moment. If you will. Also, you can follow me at social media, at Twitter, at Blue Sky, and TikTok, all under BW Rosas. You can find me at DeviantArt you can find me at other places like DeviantArt, like at BVW1979. You can find me at inkbuddy.net at BW Rosas, and for Affinity at BW1979. Also, guys, during this live video premiere, the live chat will be open, so if you want to chime on in your thoughts and everything and what you think is going to happen, be greatly appreciated. And also, SuperChats are open, guys. If you want to chime those in as well, give your thoughts along with a potential donation if you want to help me out in that perspective. It helps out in a big way. Go ahead and do so. I'd love to hear your thoughts along with any SuperChats you might want to bring into the equation. Also, comments will be open on both occasions, live video premiere and afterwards. And also, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't get here in time for the live video premiere, but you still want to help donate, then you can do so through the Super Thanks option, which is a little heart with a dollar sign. But with that said, guys, let's get on to the topic at hand. So, let's be honest. There are those out there that don't know too much about certain sports, but they are trying their best to know. They ask a lot of questions, so very inquisitive, so that way they can have a knowledge. They can pretty much not have to worry about asking questions again, and they can be like, yeah, I know what that was. I know what that was. Cool. I know how that's going to go. Or, hey, I see that referee's being biased, or whatever the case might be. Or, hey, that referee missed a call. You know, there are people like that. I mean, heck, you got commercials that pretty much play into that, if you will. But with that said, of course, when it comes to playoffs, you know, that is probably one of the biggest situations that really, really is questionable. You know, but if you explain to the people, if you explain to them from a generous, understanding, respectful way, if you explain to them, yeah, it's kind of basically a tournament, and then you explain to them that the highest seeds earned the opportunity to rest up for about a week, and thus they await whoever is the lowest seed that remains in the tournament, they will have a good understanding. And that's basically what the NFL playoff is. The NFL playoffs is a tournament. It's a tournament to see who represents the AFC and the NFC at the end of the day. And for example, when you look at, this year's bracket, basically, it would maybe confuse some people, but again, when you kind of give them the example of, hey, it's a tournament and this is how it's done, and maybe you compare it to similar tournaments that have identical seedings, if you will, number-wise, numeral-wise, then there's a good chance they'll have a good understanding. They'll catch on, if you will. And again, like I said, there are commercials out there that literally play off this, if not make a joke out of it, or whatever the case may be, but they do play it in to the commercials because there are people out there. But with that said, this is not to insult anybody. This is to help out those that may not truly understand, the brackets, when it comes to the NFL playoffs, or even, MLB or NBA, what have you. But or even NCAA, if you will, because we know that's coming up within a few months. But anyway, this is how the brackets are listed on both sides. For the NFC, you have Seattle at number 1. Now, the reason they got that seeding is because they basically beat San Francisco. And San Francisco ended up in the number 6 seeding, because of the fact that, well, they lost to LA earlier in the year, I believe, and then they also won against them. So they were one apiece. Basically, long story short, it was the same with Seattle. They beat Seattle at home, but Seattle had a very identical record, or at least close to it. So the short end of it is on this past Saturday, when you guys saw me do that live reaction. I thank you for the likes during that and the reaction to it, the reaction from you guys to my reaction. Basically, what was on the line was, the number one seed, the home field advantage. And what that would mean is whoever won would get to rest up for an extra week and have the knowledge that, quite possibly, very strongly from a percentage perspective, they would have home field throughout the playoffs. That being the second round, which is divisional, and the third round, which is the conference championship, they would have that home field. But that's not always guaranteed. We know that. But it's a high percentage that normally that's the end result. But Seattle ended up winning against San Francisco, if you will, not in a huge way, but basically in a way that shows that, yeah, they have some things they got to work on too. Seattle winning in the way they did granted them that home field advantage. Because even though they lost earlier in the season at home against San Francisco, they beat San Francisco, so that kind of broke the tide. Broke the tie, if you will. And Seattle ended up getting that number one seed, and Luma Field is going to be, pretty much the residence for them up until the Super Bowl, whatever, if they make it that far. The same on the AFC side of things. Denver has home field advantage. Now, there was a good chance they could lose that home field advantage had they lost to, the LA Chargers. Had they lost to the LA Chargers, and depending on some other factors, that home field advantage would have gone to New England, because both had identical records and everything, but I think they did meet up in the regular season, and it was that regular season matchup. If they did, I can't remember, that was basically was the toss-up. It was the toss-up, right there, of who was going to get home field should that come to be. And also the fact that they had identical records as well. Well, Denver won out, and New England, yeah, they'll play a home game, but they're not going to have home field advantage. Denver will. Denver ended up winning their match against Los Angeles, against the Los Angeles Chargers, and thus they will be hosting a majority of the playoffs, that being the divisional round, second round, and the third round, the conference championship, should it get that far. Now, how does this all impact the seedings outside of them? It's real simple. The seedings that happened afterwards go like this. You have 4 against 5, or 5 at 4. The number 5 seeded team going to the home of the number 4 seeded team. You have the number 6 seeded team going to the home of the number 3 seeded team, and you have number 7 going to number 2. That's pretty much how it is. Basically, it's the higher ranking seeds, if you will, in this tournament host playoff games. And depending on the journey throughout the tournament, they could either still be hosting playoff games or they'll be on the road. Because this is how it works out. Denver and Seattle are number 1. So in the next round, this is who it will come down to for them potentially hosting. They could be hosting, the Green Bay Packers if Green Bay beats Chicago. They could be hosting the San Francisco 49ers, this being Seattle, that is, if San Francisco beats Philadelphia. And they could be hosting the LA Rams if the LA Rams beat the Carolina Panthers, or, basically that. It could be that essentially, it in a nutshell. That, the Rams, the Packers, and the Niners could be Seattle bound. Now you might say, well, what about Carolina? What if they win? What if Seattle wins? What if the Bears win? Well, then Carolina just joined that equation because they would be the lowest seed. So again, to correct myself here, Seattle basically would be awaiting either the Rams or Panthers or the Packers or the Niners. Those are the 4 teams they'd be awaiting. The same with Denver on the AFC side of things. Denver would be awaiting, essentially, either the Los Angeles Chargers, the Buffalo Bills, or the Houston Texans, or Pittsburgh Steelers. Those are the four. Denver would be awaiting the potential hosting of, like I said, either the Chargers, the the Bills, or the Texans or Steelers. Depending on who is the lowest seed going into the second round. Now you might say, well, what about the other seeds? How does that work out? Well, it's real simple. It's real simple. If Chicago wins and Philly wins, then Philly would go to Chicago. Basically, the lower seed goes to the higher ranking seed. Same with the AFC. If New England wins and Jacksonville wins, Jacksonville goes to New England. Pretty much very simple. Very simple. Basically, here's the thing. Outside of the number one seed, who gets the lowest seed in the second round, the divisional round, the second highest seed outside of that would be hosting a divisional round game as well. So, in this case, if things play out the way people think it would, New England would host potentially Jacksonville or, Pittsburgh. Jacksonville or Pittsburgh, that would be, the seeds they would face, because if Buffalo wins and everything, Buffalo would go to Denver. Pretty much how it is. Basically, the lowest seeds go to the highest ranking seeds, to advance, for the tournament advancement, if you know what I mean. That's pretty much how it plays out. Same on the NFC side of things. If Chicago beats Green Bay, and Philly beats, San Francisco, Philly goes to Chicago, then that would leave LA, the LA Rams, or Carolina Panthers to battle it out to see who goes to Seattle. That's pretty much how it works. Now you might say, well, what if we get a ring-a-ding-ding kind of deal? Now, I'm pretty sure you're wondering what ring-a-ding-ding means. Ring-a-ding-ding basically means, what if we get something that is out of the ordinary? What if something else occurs? What if upsets occur? That could happen too. That could happen too. I mean, for example, if San Francisco beats Philadelphia and Green Bay beats Chicago, basically what that would mean is San Francisco would go to either Carolina or Los Angeles, because, those are the higher ranking seeds than them. And that means Green Bay goes to Seattle. Same on the AFC side of things. Same on the AFC side. If Buffalo beats Jacksonville and the Chargers beat New England, then basically Buffalo would go to Houston or Pittsburgh, because the Chargers would go to Seattle. Again, higher seeds host the lower seeds, even if they're up by one seed. Even if they're higher by one seed, they would host the lower seed. That's kind of how it works. So, yeah, basically, there are good chances that the lower seeds could host divisional round games, second round games, and potentially conference championships, but it's a long shot. And what I mean by a long shot is this. Let's say San Francisco beats Philadelphia. And then let's say they beat whoever they meet in the second round, which could be either LA, it could be Carolina, if you will. Could be one of them. Could be LA or Carolina. Let's say, hypothetically, that happens. Let's say that happens. Let's say that occurs. And then let's say Green Bay beats Seattle. Then Green Bay would come to Santa Clara. That's right. And if I sound like I'm a little distracted, it's because I'm just checking outside, because circumstances beyond my control and beyond beyond the other half of the household's control cause that have to be home early, if you know what I mean. But anyway, getting back on point, basically. Essentially, that's what it is. San Francisco could host the NFC Championship game if this happens. If Green Bay beats Chicago and then goes to Seattle, beats Seattle, and San Francisco beats Philadelphia in either LA or Carolina, they could host the NFC Championship. That's a possibility. That's a possibility. The same on the AFC side of things. If Buffalo beats Carolina, I mean not Carolina, but beats Jacksonville. Buffalo beats Jacksonville and everything. If they beat Jacksonville, and beats, San Diego beats New England, and then San Diego beats Denver because again Denver would host them as the lowest seed, and then Buffalo beats Houston or Pittsburgh, then Buffalo would be hosting an AFC Championship game against the Chargers. Again, it's a long shot, but it's a possibility. It is a strong possibility, long shot, but it's a possibility. And never say never. These playoffs, let's be honest, doesn't matter if it's the NFL, doesn't matter if it's the NBA, NCAA, MLB. It doesn't matter what the seedings are. If the team has the momentum or if the team, wants it badly, wants it enough, then they're going to do what they got to do. They will play the football, they will play the game that they know ensures them victory, ensures them, a trip to that next round. So basically that's how it works. Essentially, end of the day, it's higher seed host the lower seed when it's all said and done. And right now, the highest seed on both conferences is Seattle NFC, Denver AFC, and if things work out the way people always projected it works out, and sometimes, if not most times, could be wrong about, then they would be hosting everything up until, the Super Bowl, which means they'd both be taking a trip to Santa Clara. But we'll see. Because again, a lot of things can come out of this. Chicago could end up hosting the NFC Championship. That's a fact. New England could host the AFC Championship. That's a fact. Jacksonville could host it. Pittsburgh or Houston could host it. If you know what I mean. Buffalo can host it. The only teams that will not host anything and will be on the road constantly, will be the LA Chargers and the Green Bay Packers. They will be the ones that will always be on the road. They will be always on the road. Unless, let's say, let's say some kind of weather phenomenon decides otherwise, if you know what I mean. But anyway, yeah. Basically, 1 to 6, 1 to 6, the seeded teams of 1 to 6 have a good chance of hosting the conference championships. That is a fact. That is a fact. So, yes, even though San Francisco and Buffalo would mostly be on the road, there is a good chance if things go their way, or the way that people I'm sure in their fan base are hoping. I mean, I'm part of the 49er fan base, don't get me wrong. But if things go the way they're all hoping, then that could potentially occur. That could potentially happen. And I'll tell you right now, that farewell to Highmark Stadium, the OG Highmark Stadium, I think it's called Highmark or Hillmark, right? One of them. That farewell to the OG Stadium, I think might have been, might have been premature, because there's a good chance you could have one more game there, and it could be for the AFC Championship. But yeah, basically that's how this system works. It's like a tournament where basically it's always like this: the highest seeded team hosts the lowest seeded team, no matter what the round or no matter what the round or no matter what the round. I'm trying to find another word to say round. No matter what the round or level, I'll put it that way, level of the tournament they get into, the higher seed will always host the lower seed, and the only way for the two lowest seeds to meet in a game in the tournament, round, is if number 6 wins all the way through and they host number 7. Because no matter how you look at it, number 6, number 5, and 4 will be on the road. They will have road games. Again, the only way they win, the only way they host is if a team seated below them wins, and that gives them that opportunity. That opens the door. But again, the way this works is like this. Number 4, 5, 6, and 7. Number 4, 5, 6, and 7 are basically, potentially, depending on the outcome of the wild card, potentially are Seattle bound on the NFC side, and the same with the AFC side with Denver. Basically 4, 5, 6, and 7, depending on the outcome of the of the wild card, are potentially bound for either Denver or Seattle, depending on what happens. And then after that, Chicago and New England got the next dibs on who they would host in the divisional round. But then again, that could all change because they could end up losing, and then the number 3 seeded team would be the host, and that's either Philadelphia or Jacksonville. So anyway, yeah, pretty much at the end of the day, guys, that's how it goes. It's basically high seed team ranked the highest, seeded the highest, is going to host the team that's ranked the lowest, seeded the lowest, until we get to the Super Bowl. And that's the same with any playoff of any sports league. So hopefully for those that might be new to this, but or may not be new to this, but still don't have a grasp, and I say it with all due respect, love, and no offense, for those out there that have that, I guess you could say inquisitive questioning and wonderment, hopefully this helped out. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Let me know if any of you have had to help, respectfully and lovingly explain to those in your family and in your friend circle, how this works. Let me know down below, as well as in the live chat if you haven't already. And guys, do me yourself a favor, if you can, and that's like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. And click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere, as well as to support me also outside of YouTube as well. But guys, give me your thoughts, and until then, I am out. And also, let me know what you hope would be an outcome for your team that you represent.